Welcome to Your Future Starts Now, the go-to podcast for extraordinary women who are ready to step into their next chapter with authentic confidence. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua, empowerment coach, motivational speaker, children's book author, and girl mom. Whether you're a corporate powerhouse or an entrepreneur, this show is designed for you. Your Future Starts Now is more than just a podcast. It's a movement towards rewriting the rules of success for high-achieving women. Are you ready to get unstuck and step into your next chapter? If so, you're exactly where you need to be. Your future starts now. Welcome to Your Future Starts Now. I'm your host, Gia Lacqua. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I am excited to welcome Nadia Edwards to the show. Nadia is an expert GenX dating coach and podcast host who specializes in guiding single women over 40 to find lasting love. With a compassionate yet straightforward approach, she draws from her own experience of finding her life partner in just 30 days to empower women in their dating journey. Through her popular podcast, Grown and Tender, she delves into topics such as effective dating strategies and financial compatibility. As a dynamic speaker, Nadia shares her personal story of heartbreak, inspiring women to break patterns and make empowered choices. As a coach, she assists clients in healing, identifying personal values, and implementing successful dating strategies. Many of her clients are successful independent women who struggle to find compatible partners, but Nadia helps them overcome self-doubt and cultivate meaningful connections. Nadia, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Gia. I'm so excited.
I'm excited to chat with you. So, just in terms of your background, let's start with kind of, what led you to the work that you're doing today as a GenX dating coach?
Yeah, so great question. And I'm always hesitant to share my background because I started because I got my heart broken. And I got my heart broken at a time when I thought I had everything all together. Like everything was perfect. I had worked on myself. I was ready for this lasting relationship. And then when I started looking, it wasn't so easy. And then the person that I met, the guy that I thought was the one, he broke my heart. It was just a hot mess. He told me that he wanted to see other people. He told me this over the phone. We had dated for around a year, a little over a year. And I think the way he did it and the surprise of it all, it just really devastated me. And it was at that point that I said, something has to change. I have to make different choices. And I had to admit that I did not know what the heck I was doing. I didn't know how to date. And I'll even say that, my picker was broken. I really believe that. And I had to take a step back. And you know what, Gia? I actually hired a dating coach to help me try to get out of what I was in and spinning around. But it was that moment of heartbreak and true devastation at a point where, again, I thought I was, the cat's meow. And then from that experience and just going through that as a woman in midlife, I came out of that and I developed a process that I share now with my clients.
So fascinating. I love that. So, you talk about heartbreak, and I think, we've all sort of experienced heartbreak in our lives. I would love to know, as you describe it in your 40s, right? What was different about that heartbreak for you?
What was different was I really so that whole relationship started with a mutual friend introducing us, right? So he came with this almost like this credibility. And I think at that time, because of course I thought I knew everything, right? As most midlife women do, we think we know everything. And the relationship moved so quickly because again, I was the cat's meow. I knew what I wanted, or so I thought. So when the relationship moved quickly, I didn't really pay close enough attention to what was happening. And I think a lot of women in midlife, we kind of make that mistake because we want that relationship. We want that dream relationship. And then when it comes and it kind of moves fast, we're like, yes. And we hang on to it so quickly. So that's kind of what I take away from that experience is it was just moving way too fast.
Yeah. And it's hard. I think the other thing, just to go back to what you said earlier about, being a high achieving woman in midlife, you think you know it all, you think you have it all figured out. Of course, we're never done learning and growing, but it's also really hard to admit when you've achieved success in so many facets of life
Yes.
and you
Yes.
are kicking ass in so
You're
many
right.
areas. It is really hard to admit, right, that you don't know something or you're not good at something. And so,
Absolutely.
right, that can be really crippling for women too.
And it's something that we all believe that should be so easy. It should be
Hmm.
so easy to find love. It should be
Yeah.
so easy to find your person, right? Especially when you have all these accomplishments under your belt. It's like, hey, I am the prize. Can't you, don't you see it? And then when you discover that, no, they really don't see it, or they see it and they don't even know what to do with it, right? Which is a whole
Hmm.
other thing.
Sure.
Um, it becomes a little frustrating.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I can speak just in my professional and my personal network, based on kind of, where we are in our lives. I think there's sort of two groups of women that I think about that are single and um, maybe looking for a partner. So there's one which is the, you know, single professional women who have, been in relationships but have not been married. And then the other cohort, of course, are there we go. And the other cohort, of course, is the ones who are either divorced or in the process of getting divorced and looking to start their next chapter. So I would love to see in the work that, understand from the work that you do with women, what do you see as the common obstacles or struggles that Gen X women have in the dating world?
Yeah. One of the biggest obstacles I see is we don't really know what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I always do with my clients is, write down what is it that you want in a partner, right? Make that list. No matter how insane you kind of think it is, make that list. And then also do a comparison of the last two relationships that you had, right? So make a list of those two people, those two men, and then start comparing and circling. What are those things that drew you to those two relationships? What were they? And then I go through this whole exercise about identifying your values, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's use that as the foundation for everything else. And you'd be surprised, Gia, that a lot of women that I've worked with really are unsure because they hold on to this romanticized idea of what a partner is or what he should be,
Mm-hmm.
and then some are like, yeah, I really don't know because it's whatever my family kind of told me or my friends kind of told me, and then for them to sit back
Yeah.
and really reflect on what it is, what are you looking for, what are those values, and I'll also add that yes, do that. But also, what is it that you want your life to look like, to feel like moving forward from wherever you are right now? Like,
Mm-hmm.
forget about everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I was single, never married in my 40s.
Mm-hmm.
There are not too many men who are looking, men would really like look at me and say, like, what's wrong with you? Like, how come you've never been married? You're in your 40s. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. Can't you see? I'm the prize, right? Um, and so that's a whole other stigma that a lot of
Yeah,
single women over 40
for
have,
sure.
right? To have that conversation. And I don't even think like now looking back and now where I am now, I don't have to justify that either.
No.
Like I'm like, what does it matter? Um, but yeah, so I always start off with that foundation because I think a lot of women kind of miss what they are really looking for in a partner and what do
Mm-hmm.
they want their life to look like with that partner.
Yeah. It's great advice. And I think it's super powerful and probably very applicable to um, younger women too, right? Who are in the dating pool and looking for somebody. Nobody teaches you how to look for a partner or what to look for specifically
Yeah.
when you're dating, right? And so, but we do get all these messages. So, first, I would love to touch upon what do you see to be as the societal or cultural conditioning that impacts women when it comes to dating? I know you touched upon the familial piece, so I would love
Yeah.
your take on that.
I think a lot of times when it comes to dating, it's always the end result. It's never the beginning about, what do you do before you meet that person in real life?
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking for? And then when you meet them in real life, that first date, that first in real life person date, what questions are you asking? A lot of times I talk with my clients and the first date, like they want to get all the information. I'm like, whoa, no, that's not the purpose of that, right? The purpose of the first date, that in person, is to make sure that person is real, right? You want to make sure that person exists. And then two, see if there's any physical attraction, because if there's no physical attraction, I don't care how great the person is,
Sure.
most likely it's just not going to work out. And then you want to ask, I always recommend asking at least three questions that kind of align with your values. And you want to see how this person responds, right? And then decide, okay, based on this
Mm-hmm.
checklist that I had, maybe we'll have a second date. And if you don't want to have the second date, it's okay. It is okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So really helping to figure out if their values align with your core values.
Yeah, and not to put so much pressure on that first date. I
Mm-hmm.
think and not to think about the ending in the early stages,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes that, again, that romanticized,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm looking for the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are, but we want to go through this process of really vetting out this person to make sure that he is the one, right?
Yeah. It's a great point. And I wonder how much of that influences us, men or women, when we're in relationships and ignoring the red flags, right?
Yeah, the red, the blue, all of them, right? And yeah, it's very interesting because if we are so focused on that dream
Yeah.
relationship,
Yeah.
that is all we focus on, and anything that comes up in between, you're like, oh, it's not such a big thing. Like,
Hmm.
it's not such a big thing. And then those little things add up to big things. And
Yeah.
then the dream gets shattered,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Or we tell ourselves these stories that, oh, I can fix that, or he will change, right? And as opposed to really looking in the mirror and having those tough conversations. So I think that's a really good point. I would also love to know from your experience, what role, as you think about dating women in their 40s and 50s, it's very different than dating, I guess, in your 20s. How does self-worth come into play when you think about romantic relationships?
Yeah. It's a very interesting idea. So self-worth plays a huge part, right? And I think most accomplished women, we our self-worth is strong. Like I said, I was the cat's meow, right? We believe that we are strong in all of these things and would make an excellent partner. I think the tricky part is when you now try to meet that partner and you are rejected.
Mhm.
Then I think that self-worth part kind of, you kind of take a step back and you're thinking to yourself, am I worthy? Am I good enough for the relationship if, I've had three men reject me in a row? So what do I recommend women do? You go back to that values list and you have to, like, it's a real mindset shift where
Mhm.
it is that you're going to choose the partner, right? As opposed to allowing the man to choose you. Like, you want to get in that position. And that's how I also recommend that women date multiple men at the same time. And that dating is to be able to observe their behavior, see if they align with your values, and to give you time to sit back. And it's almost like, and I hate to say this, but it's like when you have, like, if you're interviewing candidates
Right.
You want to have all your candidates out and you're like, oh, well, this person has, meets these three things I'm looking for, this one too, or this one absolutely not, give them the thanks for playing letter. It's almost like that type of thing, but not so harsh.
Right.
I mean, um, but then for the women, so if you go into like you were talking about women who have been in relationships and maybe
Mm-hmm.
they're now divorced,
Mm-hmm.
those women now, um, they're a little tricky, right? So now they're probably thinking about, am I good enough? I've been married for X amount of years and the relationship did not work. Well, again, go back and look at where you are today. What is it that you want your life to look like with a
Mm-hmm.
partner? Because those values probably have shifted from when you're in your 20s and 30s, now in your 40s and 50s with all of the life experiences. And now let's talk about the pause, right? Because now, if you're in your 40s and 50s, now you have the pause, right? Many, peri, whichever phase you're in,
Yep.
and your body's doing all different things.
Sure.
So now it's another aspect that you have to put in and to think about, which is very different from women in their 20s and 30s. They don't have to worry about the pause. They don't have to be concerned about their parents aging, right?
Yeah.
And also getting older. When you're in your 40s and 50s, you're thinking about retirement. How many more years do I have to retire? And that also plays a part into the type of partner that you choose.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. I love what you're saying because it's really what it sounds like to me is being very intentional
Yes.
about designing that future with someone else, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
that's really important because so often in so many aspects of life, we want to be, easygoing and go with the flow and sort of just, live for the moment or, we're planning for, like you said, the end goal, but not really working through the process. And so I think intentionality is incredibly, it's just an important word that's coming up for me as I hear you talking around.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
be intentional based on what you want. Like
Right.
it's so much like this inner desire
Yeah.
that I think a lot of time women in midlife kind of we don't we don't embrace or even honor what we really want,
Hmm.
because we're doing things for everybody else.
Yeah. Right,
Yeah.
because we've been conditioned to put everyone else's needs first, take care of
Yes.
everybody else before ourselves, right? And so what happens to our needs and our desires is they get, they're at the bottom of the list and who has time for that. So
Yeah.
it's a great point is prioritizing yourself. And I love what you said too about like people who have been quote unquote rejected, but it's really a shift in mindset around, maybe it's not rejected, maybe it's redirected.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But
Right.
but we're going to say, "Oh my gosh, he
Right.
rejected me." But
Right.
absolutely to change the mindset to say, "Huh, he just wasn't my person.
Right.
He just wasn't my let me go back into this my candidates," right?
That's right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge mindset shift, right? Because that can be so damaging to our ego
Yes.
and our sense of self and that worth that it can really, I can imagine that, sort of derail people. So that's a really important point. I mean, similar to in business, right? As an entrepreneur, if somebody doesn't want your services, it's not necessarily a rejection of you. They're not the right fit.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And
Not
that's
the
that's
right fit.
hard. It's a hard shift, but it's an important mindset shift that people have to have. So speaking of women and dating, I'm curious as to what role you see instinct and intuition play. Like I love what you're saying about the organization and being thoughtful and intentional about your values and sort of quote unquote interviewing, right,
Yeah.
candidates and but what role does that sort of intuitive sense play, whether it's the heart or the gut, that you tap into? How do you see that?
Yeah. I would say, listening to your gut is important, because that whole gut reason is to keep us safe. But I find that a lot of us, because I feel like a lot of us, we have kind of almost like suffocated our intuition to a point where we don't even trust it, right? We don't trust it. So now what tools do we use, right? So it goes back to, we have to start using other tools and then bring that gut and intuition back and start trusting it again. And that happens by, going on these dates and then doing the, observing people and then making sure that when you get that feeling, right? You pay attention to the feeling, what is that feeling about? And then try to look for real evidence to validate the feeling. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think I know I have, I kind of like mistrusted my gut because it kind of led me, it broke my picker. So I didn't trust it anymore. So I had to use a different tool until my picker was now, I'm not going to say fixed. I'm going to say it was reconditioned.
Reconditioned. I love it.
It
I
was
love it. Till
reconditioned.
it was
Yeah.
strengthened, right?
Until it was strengthened.
I love
But yeah.
that. I love that. And I think that's so true. I think we often neglect or ignore the intuition, right? And I think we're sort of conditioned also to just, don't worry about that nagging feeling in your gut. Just go with it, right? Or in so many aspects of life again. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, either we ignore it or we say, or we have this feeling, it's like, oh my gosh, he's the one, right? And he's the one could be based on, some early childhood experience that may have been a bad
Yeah.
experience, right? And now
Right.
that feeling is, oh yes, he's the one. And it's like, no, whoa, wait,
Right.
right? So we go back into what is the evidence that you're seeing that validates this feeling that you
That
have,
gut feeling.
that gut feeling.
I
Yeah.
love that. Really great advice. Um, is so important. Nadia, I guess, we talk a lot about redefining success on this
Mhm.
podcast. So I would love to know from your perspective and your experience, right? And what you've been through, how do you define success for yourself today? And how has that definition evolved for you over time?
Oh yeah. So I redefine success or define success as, have I accomplished what I said I would do? Did I the promise that I made to myself? Because now I make a promise to myself, right? I don't have so much like goals, but I make a promise because I feel like it's more of something more intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I make the promise to myself, make sure I meet that promise. So it goes back into, right, women in midlife, how we take care of everyone else. Well, when I make the promise to myself, that is a moment that I'm saying, I'm going to take care of this thing that I really need to get done. And when I meet that promise, I'm like, yes. And that is how I define success. So even for like the women that I help, it's always, what is the promise that you want to make to yourself? What is that promise? And it may not be, it may be a companion. It
Mm-hmm.
may be you want to get a husband.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the promise is, what that thing is that you want to get to. Maybe the promise is, you'll go on 3 dates this month, right? For me, as an entrepreneur and as a dating coach, the promise I make is to help these women with with all that I have inside of me and all of the resources that I have. That is a promise.
I love that. I love that concept of self-promise versus goals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's another mindset shift.
totally. That's beautiful. I love that. And with the high achieving women that you work with, I'm curious how many do you still hear? I guess is this is it fact or is it myth? Do men are they still quote unquote intimidated by high achieving professional quote unquote successful women who have never been married? Is that still a thing?
Um, I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
Um, I think today most of men, and it's interesting, right? Because men in midlife, they're looking for a partner too. They're looking for someone that they can also share their life with,
Yeah.
which I think sometimes we kind of miss that. So like 55% of single men over 40, they want a committed relationship. Whereas 71% of women over 40, they're not even dating. So now that
Interesting.
huge disparity, right?
Yeah.
Um, so when you say that, and I've heard that before, and I don't hear it so much anymore, but
Yeah.
the men, interesting, right? Because I also have men who reach out to me for
Mhm.
help. And they're like, Nadia, where are these women? And they want they really want that woman who's successful
Yeah.
because they want a partner. They're not looking, some of them are not looking for, the standard housewife. Like they want a partner who can contribute financially, who can share, ease that financial burden because everything's expensive,
Mm-hmm.
right, in today's
Mm-hmm.
world.
Yeah.
Um, and then they have children from whatever relationship. And there's so many nuances, right? When you're in midlife, so many moving parts.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I can see how that has sort of evolved and shifted over time. So that's good to hear. And I would love to know if there's one thing you want our listeners to think about doing differently or changing after this episode. What would that be?
Yeah. So what I would say for all the women, think about who who did you feel most loved by when you were a child and why? Just sit back and think about that because that will kind of also help you tap into, what does love feel like for you? What does that feel like, right? Going back to trusting your gut. It's like reconditioning, right? This whole reconditioning process. And I got that from Jason Van Ruler. That is his question. He's a therapist. And it's such a great question.
Yeah.
Such a great question. Yeah.
It is a beautiful question. And I love how that ties into the work that you do, because for some of us, it is reflecting on what love looks like.
Yeah.
Right. And what we were raised to believe about love and about relationships and about healthy relationships. And so for some of us, it might entail us questioning some of the things that are so deeply ingrained, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a very, yeah, it'll make you sit back and say, wow, just like you said. Because sometimes the discovery is that it wasn't your parent or parents. It may have been like a teacher or a counselor or someone else who you felt loved by.
Yeah.
And that's why that second piece of saying, okay, you felt loved by who and why?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you feel that?
Mm-hmm. Right. That is super powerful. I love that. Nadia, if our listeners would like to connect with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Where can they learn more about you and the work that you do?
Oh, please go to my website, nadiaedwards.com. I would be excited if they book a call with me. Book a call with me. Let's have a relationship vision session, which is where I usually start with my clients. Or I also have a dating strategy quiz. So if any of these high achieving women, you want to know, like, Nadia, what do I do? Like, I heard what you said, but what do I do first?
Mm-hmm.
Take the quiz, you answer a series of questions, and I send you handpicked strategies that will get you started, or at least thinking about your next steps.
Amazing. That sounds amazing. Nadia, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your insights, your story, and your expertise. It's really been a pleasure. This has been such a fun conversation.
Thank you, Gia. I had such a great time.
Awesome. And of course, you can visit my website at gialacqua.com, reach out on Instagram at gialacqua. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. This is Gia signing off with gratitude for your time and energy. Our mic drops, but the movement continues. Until next time, your next chapter is waiting. Take care. That concludes another empowering episode of Your Future Starts Now. Before we wrap up, I want to thank this incredible community of high-achieving women. Your energy, resilience, and commitment to growth are the driving force behind what we do. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate it, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower high-achieving women just like you. And of course, share Your Future Starts Now with the extraordinary women in your life who are also on a journey of healing and empowerment. Connect with us on social media, share your thoughts, let us know what topics you'd like to explore in future episodes. Stay connected on Instagram at gialacqua. I encourage you to carry the energy of this conversation into your day and keep on supporting the incredible women around you. Until next time, remember, your next chapter is waiting.